for a great conversation. Well, welcome everybody. How are you today?
Good.
Good. We have a great bunch of people. This is Joanna, and I think there may be a few more people who will join us, but we will get started. And to get started, what I'd love to do is have Amanda Martirana, who's our Deputy Director of Digital Communications and is the Chief Architect behind the scenes here, go over all the little functions on your screen that may be useful to you during the meeting. And then we'll move forward into introductions and the substance of the meeting itself. Amanda, it's all yours. Take it away.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Just to give you guys a little heads up, we are recording this session so that you can look at it and resource it another time, or for those who are unable to attend today, have the ability to know what was chit-chatted about throughout the session. We're going to ask everybody to self-mute as you feel necessary, or not mute, but just be sensitive to the fact that background noise and stuff will carry through your system. In your frame, you'll have, it's either at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on how Zoom sets up for you guys, but you can look under and see who is participating. There's an opportunity for, and if you click on that, there's also a chat function. If you have comments or thoughts or questions you want to put forth or anything, please use the chat function in addition to jumping in the conversation. I know Joanna likes lots of participation, so that should be good. And if you have anything specific that you're running into problems, you can either message me directly through that chat function or as a group. Either way is fine, and I'll do my best on my end to help you guys out in whatever way I can. And I think that about covers it from my perspective, Joanna.
Well, great. Thank you, Amanda. And Amanda's a great resource. And if in fact you need to text her, Amanda, tell everybody your address just in case something goes wrong and they need
my
to get
email address is Martirana, MARTORANA @jhu.edu, and I'll also put it in the chat function, which will highlight your little chat button should you not be able to see it.
Super. Okay, well, we have a very diverse group of people with us today. Some of you don't, many of you may not know each other. And so what I'd love to do is take about 20 minutes early on now for everybody to introduce themselves briefly. Your name, your role in your organization, what you were hoping to do through PASS, and any chief questions you've got. And I'm just going to say, since I don't see all of you, we're going to have to figuratively go around the table. Who'd like to jump in? I noticed Gil Compton was on. Let's start.
Good morning, Joanna. My name is Gil Compton. I currently work at the Riverside County Office of Education in Riverside, California. I'm the Director of College and Career Readiness. And our county office has been participating in the Early Warning System and PAS project for about the last 2 years under another director. And so looking to investigate a possible pilot for this year, focused on anything from transcript analysis and college readiness to high school readiness in regards to early indicators from a middle school analysis.
Super, thank you, Gil. Who's next? Eric Meredith, I think you're on the line.
Yeah, this is Eric Meredith. I'm with the Department of Education for the state of Montana, which is the Office of Public Instruction. So I've developed a statewide early warning system for Montana for high school graduates. We also have a college and career readiness indicators or indicator system, I should say, that is available to certain schools in the state.
Super. Wouldn't you love to hear more about that later, Eric? Now, I noticed that Laura Hanson is also on the line from Nashville.
Yeah, hi, Joanna. I'm Laura Hanson. I'm the Director of Information Management and Decision Support for Metro Nashville Public Schools. We have been partners with Johns Hopkins and Joanna and Dr. Balfon for, gosh, a lot of years. We were some of the originals in the development of the early warning system indicators when the dropout factory stuff was going on. So that kind of dates ourselves a little bit. We currently are involved in updating our early warning system indicators. We're also engaged in a variety of, it's funny, there's different stakeholders that are interested in the college and career readiness work. We do have a data warehouse and an extensive visualization capacity to work with data in the district based on stakeholder needs. And so we're real interested in leveraging college and career readiness data to look at students who are on track and off track, both academically, but also looking at social emotional indicators.
Super, thank you. And I wanted to point out something that is very interesting. I mean, Nashville has about, what, 80,000 students, maybe 78,000?
Yeah, we're about 88,000 this year.
88, oh my gosh, it's grown. Montana has 142,000. Riverside, Gil, can you tell me how many in the county? 400 and some? In any case, all of you on the line, or many of you, are dealing with numbers of students who are approximately in the same numerical range, whether you're districts or states, which I find a very interesting thing to contemplate. And I think why it's so interesting to share ideas back and forth. Let me see, I noticed that Chattanooga's on the phone line, Keith White. That's a smaller district, but not so bad, not so small.
Hi, it's Keith from Public Education Foundation in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we have about 45,000 students. And PEF has partnered with the Department of Education here for over 25 years on a variety of initiatives. College and Career Success is one of those. And we are most interested in how others build routines and practices in schools as people use dashboards, predictive dashboards, specifically Freshmen on Track and post-secondary readiness dashboards.
Hey, thank you so much. Let's see, Remy Washington, Aspire School, Uplift School, excuse me.
Hi, no worries. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Remy Washington. I'm high school managing director from Uplift Education, and our network is a charter network here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area, and we are looking to pilot early warning systems here in our network. And we've never done this type of work before, but we do have a pretty strong data analytics team and a lot of different indicators that we know could be really helpful in identifying when students are on and off track for college preparedness and college readiness.
Now let me see who else I did notice. I'm having a little bit of challenges here, but
I'll help you, Joanne. This is Elaine Perea calling from the Mexico Public Education Department. And we have about 100,000 high school students. We have a total of about 330,000 students in the state. And we've been through several iterations of the early warning system and have moved away from trying to develop a state system and instead are encouraging districts to do their own thing a little bit. I'm really interested in the PAS project because I'd love to see us broadening our definition of readiness to really include career readiness and to really think carefully about how to evaluate and quantify whether a student is ready for a career beyond whether they are academically prepared for college level work at a selective college.
super, that's very helpful. And we've worked with New Mexico for a long time and found them a wonderful, valuable partner. And I just wanted to piggyback on a little bit of what Elaine said. I hope all of you will not be shy in connecting with each other after the workshop, webinar, or whatever. You all have wonderfully important things to share with each other. And learnings, I think, is the best way to put it. Let's go on. I think I noticed that Philly Ed Fund's on the line. Go ahead.
Joanna, this is Carla Gay. I'm calling from Portland, Oregon, from the Gresham Barlow School District, and we are a small district of about 12,000 students, but we are situated in a region where collectively there are over 100,000 students in the area. So we're looking at how we have some system alignment in our region. My particular role has been the Director of Early Warning Systems for Portland Public Schools, and now in Gresham Barlow School District, I am leading innovation and partnerships with a focus on pathways to it, we're actually using very similar language, pathways to adult success that include career and college opportunities with looking at different career ladders that allow students to sort of off-ramp into a career with industry recognized credential or continue on in a post-secondary environment at a certificated program, a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree or beyond. And so we're really looking at how we have stackable opportunities for students and how we start to engage them in preschool. Early warning systems is a real focus of ours around how we're using our data, specifically with our middle and high school students, to ensure that they're all on a pathway to success.
Okay, thank you so much. And Carla did wonderful things in Portland, and I really look forward to her work now that she's out a little bit in the suburbs, if I gather correctly, but bringing the whole region together. Now I see that we've got Jackie Lundberg, Alita, Tina Stenson, and Alan Richards on the phone, who I've not called on, as well as Philly Ed Fund. And so would some of you step forward?
Sure. This is Aletta Estrada. I am the Director of College Readiness with Uplift Education. So I work with Remy Washington, who already spoke a little bit about our network. But we're just looking to see how we can build additional support systems. We do have an extensive alumni support program to help support our scholars once they graduate and once they're in college. And so looking at, I support our academic counselors and things like course selection, graduation requirements, just looking at how we can streamline and make sure that we're being more intentional with the systems that we're using while our scholars are with us in school, and how we can make sure that we're aligning to how we're supporting them as alumni.
Super. That's something that I think everybody's interested in, and I'm going to ask Amanda, can we make sure that everybody gets each other's email addresses so that they can all check in with each other if there are questions they want answered after this webinar?
Sure, we can handle that.
Super. Okay, now I see Tina Stenson, also from Nashville.
Hi, I'm Tina Stenson. I'm Director of Research and Evaluation. I'm not going to say too much because Laura Hanson covered a fair amount of what we're doing. I will say that we are interested in the PAS for a number of reasons. We need to update our dropout indicators based on some discussions we've had already, and we're planning to look at our state's longitudinal data systems to really start to hone in on, if we can, what predicts adult success.
Thank you so much. How about Jeff Watson?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Watson. I'm an independent contractor. In prior lifetimes, I have been VP for an ed tech company over the ed research and predictive analytics group. I've also been a researcher and technical assistance provider through UW-Madison and Department of Ed, in particular for projects that we're seeking to do, pretty ambitious decision-making based on various pieces of data. What's motivating me to continue to work with this group as I transition from, working for other organizations and being an independent guy is that this is a really interesting intersection that we're at. You've got a lot of technical systems that have to be integrated to do the PAS work. And more importantly, you have a lot of social and organizational issues to be very aware of and concerned about, because the whole point of doing this work is to help people make decisions and improve their day-to-day capacity. So the goal is to fit the technology to the work and not fall into the trap of letting the work be shaped by what the technology can or cannot do. And I'll stop there.
I think that's a wonderful point to make, that we all need to bring to the front of our little brain. I also want to point out that you are a very eclectic group. There's still a few more folks I'd love for them to introduce themselves, but the eclecticness of this group really represents what we want to do with PAS, which is introduce all sorts of different perspectives into college and career readiness and persistence. Now there are a few more of you. Who'd like to jump in?
Hi, Joanna. This is Liz Nolan with the Philadelphia Education Fund. We were a part of the initial development of the EWI Early Warning Indicator System, and we have implemented that model in 16 high schools across the school district of Philadelphia at one time. And we're really interested in looking at those college and career readiness indicators and identifying how we can better use those data points and systems within the teams in our schools to guide students towards, better and successful college and career pathways, and avoid, duplication of services, and work with the teams within our buildings to really leverage the data that we have available.
Super. Philadelphia has been a partner with JHU since I think 2006, if not 2004. So we're just delighted to have you continue working with us. How about other people? Alan, are you on the line?
Yes, ma'am. Alan Richard. I'm an education writer in Atlanta, and I'm working some with the Everyone Graduates Center at Johns Hopkins.
And Alan shouldn't say yes, ma'am, but he's a Southerner. So this is what happens. I lived there for 30 years. I know. But I also want to share that, Alan is a distinguished veteran journalist who's written for Ed Week and Hechinger Report and a few others. We just value having him with us.
Thank you so much.
Sure. This is Laura Bush from Baltimore City Public Schools. I work in the Office of Accountability, and I manage our early warning indicator dashboards.
Fabulous. Tell us a little bit. Okay. Well, if there's nobody else, or let me rephrase that, if I've missed anybody, speak up now or jump in a little bit later. And if not, yep.
So, Joanna, this is Ed Eldridge from Sacramento, California, and I come from Sacramento City Unified School District, and I am the Director for Strategy and Innovation, and I oversee our strategy efforts and our continuous improvement. My task here is to use data to help ensure all of our students graduate with the greatest number of choices from the right array of options. And so we are very heavily invested in using data to help our students enroll, access, and persist throughout college. And so I'm glad to be on the call.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And I know Sacramento is trying to do some extremely interesting work. And so we'll keep that in our mind too. So if nobody else is on the line, let's go forward. And as I said, if there are others of you, jump in. So what are we talking about? And let's see, Amanda, how are we going to coordinate how we advance the slides?
I'll be advancing the slides, Joanna. Just let me know when you want to move forward, or if I can just sort of intuit it, I will do so.
Okay, and this is Ann Mayo, who just introduced herself. She's another valuable member of the team at Everyone Graduate Center and on the FAST project. So welcome, Ann. And I think we can, you've all got, if I am correct, you've all got the introductory slide on your screen. And if Ann wants to advance it just one slide, it would be super. Just to remind you all what our goal is, this is a vision that was arrived at during the first year of Pathways to Adult Success Project. And it was arrived at very collaboratively, and there was some discussion, quite a lot of discussion actually, about the exact wording, but I think we arrived at something that really made most folks happy. And if you want to kind of focus, reduce this to a very short focus, what we are talking about is once we get students out of high school and they get themselves out of high school, what do we want? What we want is for them to persist in what they've done for the next couple of years. And that can be college, it can be community college, it can be four-year college, it can be a technical workplace that requires some skills. But what we're looking at is helping students and young adults do that difficult transition from being a student to being a functioning member of their community and a contributing member of their community, as well as supporting themselves and their family. So, you've got that in writing now, and let's move on to the third slide. And can we move on a bit to the next one? Did we have a, wait. I'm not sure whether my Zoom is not working, but I'm not seeing the next slide. Are other people seeing the next slide?
The slide that is up is the one with the internal theory of action, Joanna.
No, the one that should be up, I think, is the previous one, but nothing's actually, it all disappeared from my screen. I apologize, but
I'm having trouble with Zoom as well, Joanna, but I would just continue on. I think most people can see the slide.
Okay, the next slide is the one that really gave an overall graphic. It's in the middle, if it were, it had a picture of early warning systems and said EWS 2.0. And it conveyed the thought that our work from Everyone Graduate Center is really centered on our initial work in 2006 on early warning systems and the idea of data-driven actions in schools. So what we've added in a major way, I would say, to PACT is the idea that it takes community collaboration and post-secondary collaboration when we start looking at what's happening beyond K-12. So we've complexified the situation quite substantially. When you look at an early warning system, essentially you're looking at what can be done within a school or district. Behavior course passing. You can keep track of all of that within the school. When you look at students' persistence, outside of school, you need to cross many lines in order to find out that information and to act on it. So that is the key new ingredient that we've added. I'm sorry, I'm still having problems, and I keep on saying connecting. So let me just go on from memory here that the further ingredient we've added as we shift into past pilots, which is the focus of this conversation today, is that we, with the vision of past, have articulated where we want to go and what we want to happen. But with you as partners, not partners, we would like to say, how do we get there? And how do we get there starts out with the vision, and then it breaks down into some pilots. You're all practical people, as are we. We've all spent our lives in school. And what that means is that we know from experience that we can't or shouldn't perhaps generalize without having tested the water ourselves. That's what the pilots are all about this year. And we'll get into their actual nature a little bit later. Then what we are going to do with the past and internal theory of action is use what we learned from you and hopefully what you learn from you to construct some models of action. And we know that those may differ. There will be very different, perhaps, models depending on various situational factors. Excuse me, it's telling me I can't connect. In any case, we'll construct models. Then we are going to, and that will happen by late next year, around October, November 2019, when we hope to have a dissemination conference. And I shouldn't say hope, I will say will. That's what we've committed to the Gates Foundation to do. Then we'll move into implementing, and we will always be finding a way to get feedback, because that is essential. How do we fine-tune this? You can put this in fancier words, which is continuous improvement, improvement science, and so forth. But it's essentially figure out what you're going to do it, learn from it, and do more. Okay, how about next slide? Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to work off my home PowerPoint on my laptop, and y'all speak up if you have any questions. And Amanda, since I'm not seeing the chat box, if you want to jump in, or Alan, and say, whoops, so-and-so has a question, please do so. The next slide just introduces, again, why we're doing the pilot. We want to learn from all of you, period. It's not a research project, and I want to stress that. It is a learning project at this point, without the formal constraints that one would find in a research project. The second consideration is that we know the pilots will differ. And Anne and Amanda, I hope you can keep up with me, since I really can't see what you're doing or what's on the screen for other people. But what we know is that the past pilots will differ. You're going to have different kinds of lead organizations and partners. You've got different needs and interests locally. There are different efforts currently going on in your district or state And we'd like to make sure that we'd like for you and us to make sure that what you do is aligned with your efforts. We're not intending to put in extra work in terms of new initiatives. And that's something we're pretty strong on. The whole school improvement effort required 3 to 5 year plans, if you'll all remember back, and often took a year of planning. Right now, we're interested in exploring smaller pieces of puzzle in order to construct the model, as I mentioned. We also know, or think, that your location might matter. If you're working with rural schools like Erica is doing, and some of the folks in Riverside, California, what you do may look different than what you do in an urban district, and what is possible to do in an urban district. So just throw that out. And then again, if you're a smaller district, I don't know if Francis Dumas Hines from Indiana was able to join us, but that's a smaller district. When you look at a smaller district, what are the capacities and infrastructure? We got to accommodate all that, and we want to learn about that. And then we're talking about what kind of data can you use to work with your schools to get and to learn what is working for your students going on to college and workforce. Kentucky and Georgia, as a state, at the state level, have super information systems that combine K-12, early learning, post-secondary, and some workforce data. People in those states can, with a flip of the switch, as it were, go to the web and find out a lot about their district and their student success. In other states, you may have to form an alliance with a local university and say, okay, we want to know how our kids are doing, and we hope you want to know more about the students we're sending to you. So there are various gradations there. To summarize it all, this is the blue beads on a chain slide. I hope Anne has been able to keep up with this. This is a way to think about it. In the following slides, I'll break down how we've thought about the past framework and the vision that you all have arrived at, or your predecessors in some cases, because we're learning just what turnover there frequently is in all your organizations. But in any case, when you put together the concept of pathways to adult success, one is thinking about many, many little pieces. Can each organization or district or state work on those all the time simultaneously? Unlikely, right? So we constructed the idea of beads on a chain. Each of those beads represents an idea. And at any one point in time, you may be working on one bead or two beads. And that is the idea behind Pilot for Pathways to Adult Success. You choose the bead you'll work on. And so right now, I'm going to stop and ask if there are any questions. I've done a lot of talking and love to hear from you. No questions?
Joanna, this is Carla Gay. And I think my questions really are more about, like, I get this sort of conceptually, but I'm not actually sure what the pilots would look like. So I think you're just setting the stage for that. So I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything, because I get that there's lots of variations based on all kinds of factors. And I'm just kind of curious what you're thinking are the foundational elements for the pilot project. And I'm assuming you're going to go there next.
Well, I am. Thank you for that stage setting comment. Anybody else would like to throw something out into the hopper? Okay, but do interject, and just remember that you'll have to, I guess, flag Anna and Amanda's attention if you use the chat box so that they can relay them verbally. So when we think of the beads, what we want to look at in the next year, we're calling them key ingredients. And here you go. First of all, we want to know that you agree with the past vision. I'm assuming you wouldn't be on the call if you didn't, or if you weren't interested. Then second, we need local leaders and champions. None of the work is going to happen without folks like this, right? And then third, as I mentioned earlier, as these go beyond early warning systems, we're going to need collaborators and collaboration. Then fourth, fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4. Within your district or the group of folks who are working, we've got to have trust in relationships. That, I think, is something we all know, but you may have to choose as you look at a pilot where you know there's trust and good relationships and where there might not be. Choose in picking your past pilot. Pick the ones where there is trust. And you'll notice I'm saying something. I'm saying choose your past pilot. We are not from the Everyone Graduate Center telling you what to do, if I may put it that way. We are exploring in order to build a model which will be more directed. So we have the vision, we have the framework. Now we're working to operationalize that. And in terms of what you choose to pilot, what you choose to look at with a magnifying glass, if you will, that's your choice working with us. So going on to the next slide of key ingredients, we do want to look at what you're doing with your data through the lens of your data. So what can you collect data on and how wide is it? That's something that you should keep in mind as you say, what will we study in the past pilot? If you can't get data, if you don't know the data, if it's really not available, probably not the best thing to look at. If the data is bad, let's set that aside and choose a different focus. Can you monitor what's happening in your pilot? Can you get internal feedback? At the heart of it is a question of, do you have early warning systems already in place so you can build on them? And I know one group I was talking with said, well, they were really interested in looking at the 8th to 9th grade transition. And then what happened to those kids 4 or 5 years later when they went to college? That's something that requires an early warning system in place, or getting it in place, and then a follow-up to it. And then the last question might be, can you talk with the people across boundaries? Are middle schools able to talk with high schools with college, or workforce, and workforce? So those are kind of all the key questions that are in it, around which you might want to frame a pilot. Any questions, comments, observations?
Joanna, did you want to go on to the next slide, the one that starts with rigorous engaging instruction?
That might not be on my, again, that's a very nice question. It might not, yes, I skipped it, and I appreciate your comment. As we go on to other elements of key ingredients, there is something that we've all been perhaps not delving deeply into enough in terms of a pilot as I've talked to people, and that's rigorous and engaging instruction. After all, what keeps kids in school and motivates them is really interesting teaching on subjects that matter, right? And then, kind of working around that, there's the idea of experiential and work-based learning that motivates many, many kids. If they see how what they're learning is applied, what it produces when learning is applied. And then we start digging down, and this is something I know is important to Jill Compton and a couple others on this call, college and career exposure and expectations. How do kids know what they're getting into when we talk about college and career, unless we show them? Not tell them, but show them. And then, how are we going to support them? Because all your school systems are most likely like the school we had at Prince Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, where we worked with the city schools. The kids needed mentoring and support and tutoring. These are all specific beads on the chain that you can look at in your pilot. And the reason, in our case, Baltimore Talent Development High School, the students needed support, tutoring, and mentoring was because they really did not know what college or career looked like. They weren't necessarily prepared, and they were like sponges. They absolutely thrived and blossomed when they had a caring adult who worked with them. And so we also know that we need, as another beat on the chain, to enhance advising and the navigation support for kids. What do you need to do when you need to do it? Right now, this 2 weeks, that 2 weeks. And that's something you can put under the lens of your past pilot. And last of all, we've got summer melt. The fact that, as many of us know, many kids now can access college. Not all of them yet, or the workforce. But then, in that summer after high school graduation, they fall off the path. So what I've done in each of these bullet points is try and break down how do we get to the vision with the little pieces on the way to that. And for the past pilots, we're hoping that you each will step forward and help us illuminate from a very practical position what you're doing and what you learned. And so, Anne, we're going to move on to the next step. And folks, questions, comments, observations before we do that?
This is Gil from Riverside. I appreciate that detail because I've kind of been waiting for a little bit of that understanding. And I think there needs to be somewhat of a vehicle of structure that we can eventually get to, but obviously it's open landscape in regards to defining what the pilot's going to be. But what I'm also hearing you say, and maybe I'm stating the obvious, is that it's time to stop admiring the problem. And you want pilots designed specifically to address a problem of practice and then report back. Is that accurate?
That's an interesting way to phrase it. Yes, we would like folks to identify a problem of practice in your area that is something you're already working on and you want to look at more deeply. Because we don't have at this juncture extra funding to provide help beyond email and cell phone conversations, and some site visits, field support. We're hoping to get more in the future, but this essentially is a voluntary effort. You have to say, we've got a problem, we know it, here's what we're doing already, and here's what we want to learn about it. Now, is that helpful?
Yes, and I think that in adding to that is in trying to put into context, this is what I want to learn about it, is I want to learn if my current actions are improving it, to what degree it's improving it, and what is the return on investment in that improvement action.
Super question. Super consideration to keep in mind. Other folks.
Joanna, this is Alan. May I just ask a framing question that may help with the discussion? I know most of the folks on the line have interacted with the past project before or worked with Johns Hopkins on early warning systems for high school graduation over the years, those sorts of things. So there's very few sort of new folks on the line, new to the fold. But I, as being someone who's relatively new to the fold myself, I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking of folks, and others may have the same or similar question. Really, the whole purpose of this, I'm understanding that the whole purpose of this pilot stage is indeed to learn, because what we're trying to inform are guidelines, frameworks, and materials that in a year or so we can try to make available out in the field to help lots of schools and districts and states not only adjust early warning systems to look at data indicators around, students' preparation for various post-secondary paths, but also to really inform, community and post-secondary partnerships, data sharing, and other things that may be elements that will be critical to being able to keep up with how students do as they finish high school and then certainly afterward. And what we're asking folks to do is simply to take some next steps with their work in consultation with us. And I know you've been speaking with most folks already, and simply report back on things that they're learning as they turn to look at that post-secondary lens more than simply for high school graduation as an end in itself, and to share what data they have and that sort of thing with each other, which I think will inform each other's work and certainly will inform what we're able to share with everyone at the end of the project.
Is correct.
That a decent summary?
That's a lovely summary. You have any questions, other folks? This is kind of a do-it-yourself project, which is, and I will say it's in variance to much of the school, variance isn't the right word. I don't know what the right word is. School improvement the last 10 or 20 years has said, do this, do that. And it's been aimed at low-performing schools for the most part. We're not aiming there. We're aiming at what can we do better to get more kids to be prepared for success as adults. So it's really quite a radical shift in all our thinking. So when we talk about what can we do to support you and what do we ask of you, and Ann, that's that next slide, and then we go into some more detailed ones under the next step for past pilot projects. But I want to make sure from everybody that we're all on the same wavelength right now. So any comments or questions before we dive in here? Okay, so the next step. First, when you think, reflect on the past vision and reflect on what you, the state or district or organization, are already doing. What are the key ingredients that got in place? What would you like to improve or add to or modify? That's your problem of practice that will be the focus for your bead on that blue chain, if you will. And then define 3 or 4 questions that relate to that. I call them, we call them focus questions. This is not a research study, it's a learning study. And so we're going to focus on that. We are happy to help you develop your focus questions, thinking about what you are doing currently. Then think about who are the partners right now? What is the setting? Do you want to look at something at the state level that you're doing? Something at a district level? Something at a school level? I've had several districts propose they're going to choose 1 or 2 high schools that they want to work with most carefully and look at the results. Others have thought, well, we're doing something in the state that we'd really like to know more about and frame. So we run the whole gamut there. Then, how are you going to document and monitor your work? One gentleman in a southern state is going to send me the reports he sends in every 2 weeks to his local university president, who happens to be a major collaborator in this project. That's how he's going to update me. And we will talk about that, and I'll ask questions. You may want to keep hand-scribbled notes on a little piece of paper. Or we may just want to talk every couple of weeks. But we're looking at specific things about what's going on. And then there's the question of, what are your assets and resources? And some folks would have put this right up front, you know, strategic planning, needs assessment. But maybe it's more important or useful, practical, to look at those after you said, what do we want to look at? And then what we can do to help you, we can give some support to help you organize and focus your plan. We can do technical assistance from the Everyone Graduate Center, phone, email, and the above field support. We are working to set up professional learning communities, both through the work group, as you already are, but additional ones are possible. As I started realizing yesterday, we have at least 4 partners in this work who have extensive networks of rural schools. We have several partners who have urban schools. We have several partners who are regional education collaboratives. And the list goes on. So if you all are interested, we can help you set up those networks to learn from each other. And then when we culminate it, we've got the work groups this coming November and December meetings in Baltimore, and the May conference next spring. If we ask you, what do you need to do? What would we like you to do? Take notes, keep them, share them. Be willing to be interviewed and converse, and share what you're learning with other people. So what do you think? Now, you're not normally a reticent group of people.
Hi, Joanna, this is Carla Gay again. And I think I just need time to process it and look at it in like a couple of handouts or review the PowerPoint again to kind of look at the key ingredients and just what it takes. It totally makes sense. And if I'm hearing you correctly, all you're asking for us to do is sort of share our experience on a regular basis and tap into your technical assistance as needed.
That's correct. I think there are really probably 3 or 4 key points, and I may have missed the slide. But questions we have as you think about teaching what you are doing to other people, because that's really kind of the end game. A year plus 2 months. What decisions did you have to make that you might not have anticipated, or that a school had to make, or a district, or a state, in the process of getting things done? Think about what's valuable to a newcomer, and the decisions you have to make can be that. I have been surprised, because I've talked with many of you, at some of the decisions that took 2, 3, 4 months to reach when you're looking down at it. I'm interested in the amount of time it takes or to reach action. Once you make a decision, and I'm using kind of collectively here, how much time does it actually take to get things underway? Then you can go forward, and what are the hurdles you encountered unexpectedly? What are the opportunities that popped up unexpectedly that you could capitalize on? To me, those are some of the points that would be most helpful if you're teaching a school or district that has never thought about this before. You know, people develop frequently grandiose plans in strategic plans. They know what they want to do, but to get there realistically, what can you accomplish? That's really what'll work. So those are some of the key factors to be thinking about.
Hey, Joanna, this is Jeff Watson.
Okay.
I just want to sort of think out loud a little bit on that last bullet point. I think somebody made the comment earlier that was along the lines of thinking about impact. And that last bullet point, to me, becomes a lot more interesting if, in addition to identifying challenges and facilitating factors, that's also woven into some sort of sharing of degree of success. And I would imagine these projects are complicated enough, or will be complicated enough, that success will be varied across various groups of people. You know, you could be focusing on counselors and their capacity, or teachers and what they do day to day, or principals, school leadership, or kids and families themselves. So that last bullet point to me has a whole lot built into it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely true. And that's what we're looking to learn. Others. Eric, you've got one of the few statewide perspectives right now, and you're in a state, as I understand it, in which everything is voluntary. You know, I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, so we have a statewide system. However, the schools in Montana vary greatly in how much they've used the early warning system. Some of them, it is not a requirement for all schools in the state. So some of them have not even started using it, and others have been using it for, about 7 years or so. So it varies greatly from school to school where they're at in the process of using the early warning system and how they use it at each individual school. We currently leave it up to the schools to decide how they want to use it and where they want to apply it. So it varies greatly. And it also varies depending on the administrator at the school. Mm-hmm. So we also have to, for the ESSA, we are requiring that schools that are comprehensive support are required to use the early warning system. Those are the only schools that are required to do it. We do recommend it for the targeted schools, but the other schools, it's completely up to them. So, like I said, it really varies from school to school. I do, however, have a bunch of schools that I work with regularly and have for quite a few years. But I have a couple that have just come on board recently, and I'm interested in getting them involved in this particular project. And part of that has to do with I have a new part of the early warning system that we're going to be coming out with soon. It's going to be so the schools can evaluate their interventions using the early warning system. And I'd really be interested in doing something with that.
Mm-hmm. And that is the key. Many people have said, how do we know that the interventions we're using work? That's a wonderful problem of practice, to kind of drill back down into what I mentioned previously, the kind of question that you might want to ask. And as I listen to you, Eric, I could think, there's another question that is a more organizational question, I would say, which is, how does one onboard new schools or districts? You know, what is the process it takes to get a group newly involved? That would be another question one could ask to me. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so it varies from school to school because Montana did not use a statewide student information system that all the schools are required to use. So in pulling out their data to use the system, it requires a different amount of work depending on the student information system they're using. So it depends on the school and their information system they're using. We have the two most common systems that are used across the state. I have methods of helping the schools pull out the data that kind of ease that process for them, which involves creating scripts and extracts so that the schools can use them. But the schools, most of the schools that I'm already working with, of course, are already past that step.
Right.
The only challenge with the intervention stuff is a lot of schools, the first step for a lot of schools is to track that data, which most schools, at least in Montana, are not tracking that. They are not tracking which students are in which interventions. And that is actually the first step in ensuring that these schools will track that data.
That would be a very interesting, intervention question, problem of practice. If you can go beyond that and formulate a couple of key questions you want to know, we'd be on our way. How about Laura Hanson from Nashville? You've worked with us enough, and Tina, that you know kind of how we think. Shall I put it that way?
Oh yeah, I have taken some notes here, and I mean, I'm actually, there's just so much flexibility in the way that you're going about this focus. And so, I mean, it's really cool because you can really kind of get creative and really look at things. For us particularly, and Tina, feel free to chime in because I'm certainly not making any decisions here for Nashville as a whole. There's a lot to dive in here, but I'll just throw out a few of my thoughts. One, for us, we've really, over the past few years, have been looking at what are our strategic leverage points in the district. We've got leadership that's been around for a couple of years, but people really want to start seeing for us to dive into things. We went through a big strategic planning process and this huge plan with tons of projects. And now the thing they're doing is actually trying to focus in and ask some, big overarching areas of focus and big overarching questions that everybody should be looking at. For example, time in instruction, maximizing our instructional time for students, and literacy are two of those areas. And so we're trying to get the district wrapped around there. So I'm kind of I feel like we need to take a look at this in relation to those priorities that are set out for our district, and how, how some of this focus on more of getting our students on, once they get to kind of the adult side and the college and career readiness, and how we set them up for that, what that looks like in relation to, say, literacy, and ensuring, maximizing instructional time. And that has to do with, suspension rates and things that we've done with the early warning system. Attendance and chronic absence are a couple of the areas that I'm personally interested in, because I think that when you look at partners, there's the opportunity to look at the school district and community. And one of the approaches is engaging students and making school relevant to maximize their desire to attend school, make it relevant for them. And so this college and career readiness, how do we, you mentioned a few things around advising and, looking at our pathways, looking at what types of, say, interventions or supports and even program access. I think for us, equitable program access has been a real thing that we're looking at as a district. So all of that plays well together, and what you're asking us to do, I think it's, to start for us, is going to be an exercise in kind of looking, when we think about creating our own pilot, looking at first our areas of focus at the district level, because you got to get, buy-in for people to take time for this. Looking at some of the raw materials, some things that we're already engaged in, so we don't have to recreate the wheel, that can be kind of shored up with a higher level of, say, planning and discipline and a more concise approach that could even be across agencies, across departments, but also, even extending out to our program partners, and selecting from those areas, like what you said, advising, or if I looked at student engagement and what are we doing in our program.
Are you still there?
I don't hear Laura anymore. This is Tina from the same district.
Great.
I agree, but I also want to add one thing, and I don't think Laura would disagree.
Please do.
We have a state longitudinal data system that Laura has been trying to tap into for a long time. And even looking at the relationship between the things we think we're about, like around literacy or whatever, and the actual outcomes, I think has to be a really critical next step of our PAS. And part of the PAS is getting that to happen. Advising and things like that, we might need to build systems track, first of all, and that might be a longer term process, because we don't know who's been advised and who has not been advised, and for how long and in what manner. But we do know some of the we're getting to know some of the programs that kids are in say tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. Are they helping our most at-risk kids land a job or get into college and avoid remedial classes? And we really need to dig into those data, which we have not currently been able to do beyond the National Student Clearinghouse level.
Now, I think there are a couple of people on the line who may be tracking interventions already. Would any of you like to jump in if you're still with us?
This is Elaine. I'll throw a little bit in this conversation. Perkins 5 reauthorization is pushing us to really get other systems in order that aren't necessarily directly related to the early warning system, but are more closely related to CTE. That being said, the conversation about programs of study, which at least in our state has been fairly loose for a long time, Perkins 5 is going to require us to tighten that down significantly to really get to a place where program of study is really a meaningful series of courses, and it's not just a concept, but is a state defined, this course comes before that course, and then this comes third, kind of thing, and that only a few patterns become a program of study. One of the things that New Mexico has been very concerned about is tracking, and racial tracking in particular, but also income tracking. And what we found in our data that we've had to dig into in Perkins is that we had to get really granular to spot it, because what happens is that a school will offer something like a shop class, which would be a traditional kind of tracking situation where low income or minority students might be encouraged to take that sort of a class instead of college prep material. But then they'll also offer something like robotics or engineering. And if you collapse across those two programs of study, you don't see the tracking because you get a representative sample of the district population. And so we had to really drill down before we could offer schools the data-driven insights about tracking that is happening in their school or their district. So I would just throw that out there as kind of a cautionary tale about the importance of really some specificity around programs of study as an intervention and thinking carefully about what that might mean.
That's very helpful, Elaine, and I thank you for that. And I think perhaps Jill Compton might have some comments. California has for those of you who don't know, they've got a requirement called A through G, which is what is the bare minimum necessary for admission to either of the Cal State universities or the UC universities. And California is quite a tiered system. Underneath that, you have community colleges, which enroll close to 50% of the higher ed population. And the AGs are what in A through Gs are what in other states would just be considered the minimum for a university or college admission. But somehow, at least this is my perception as an outsider, they've acquired a quite different status in people's minds. And this idea and question of tracking, you know, how's one doing it? Is one doing it? It's something that is also of great interest. And I don't know if Gil wants to comment on that or not.
Sure, Joanna. I know we've got Sacramento on the call, so they are fully understanding of what A through G is. And A through G is simply the letters of the alphabet that correspond to different subject matters, A being history, B being English, and so on and so forth. And the requirements of year-long courses, number of units, semester units, as well as year-long courses that are required for entrance into the Cal State University system or the UC system. Slightly tiered, but very, tangential in regards to their requirements. But the processes that we're using on the intervention side is from the predictive analytics of taking, 8 semesters of a high school transcript, coding it, transcribing it into a database, then taking that database and matching it against the student information system at the demographic and program level, and then being able to sort it, for lack of a better term, and present it both, visually as well as in an Excel spreadsheet of where there are certain concerns. And the two major concerns the equation works on is who has access to certain courses and the progression of those courses, and then who, if they're in that course, are they being successful? And so it's been fascinating to illuminate for certain schools and schools as school systems of what kids are navigating the system and what kids are not. And so some of the analysis have allowed us to identify, it might be holistically, foreign language might not be a roadblock for the school, but for certain subgroups, it might be a tremendous roadblock. And that, understanding that and then diving in on a diagnostic level and then trying to solve that. So simple equation, access. Are the kids in the courses that they need to be in to be successful? Are they, once in that course, are they passing that course? And then all of the other off-ramps that were created because of lack of success. So master schedule design, teacher hiring, the number of units or of FTEs that we're offering sections to students are all on the access side. Managerially, we can solve a lot of those problems if we have the will and are given the resources. On the success side, we've had a different conversation. The conversation is more on grading practices. The more is on teacher expectations, going back to Joanna's point in regards to, engaging instruction. And so we focus a lot in California on curriculum and instruction. We've not focused a lot on grading practices and or, you know, how we construct our schools and specifically our master schedule. And then that drills us down into course selection processes, the messaging, either covert or overt, that we're giving students and families in regards to their pathways. And so we're really trying to approach it from a diagnostic standpoint, getting transparent about the system and then working forward.
Gil, that's wonderful. And I think what you've just outlined is the challenge for all of us. How do you drill down, and going back in a sense to what Eric just talked about and Tina, how do you narrow the question for the purposes of past pilot to something that you can really study and learn from in the course of 8 months, basically? That's what we're talking about. We all know the immensity of the challenge in front of us. And what we're looking at, going back to beads on the chain, some wonderful person this morning called it pearls on a necklace, which I think was maybe a nicer way to put it, but I called it beads on a chain, and that's where it is right now. How do we focus in? And what can we learn from focusing in? And what can you do? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think this is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I think that and this is Gil again, talking to the point in regards to the Wyoming structure. I think we all face that in regards to that school leadership or district leadership level, that those of us that are okay or accepting of the status quo, there's not great motivation to do any systems work. And so there has to be some leadership or group understanding that the status quo is no longer acceptable. And then when we acknowledge that and we acknowledge the pain that comes from that status quo, then that creates the motivation. And so it's a very tough sledding in schools, districts, or regions where the status quo is accepted and just the way that, you know, how you say it, the way it is what it is, until the acceptance of the status quo is no longer accepted, if that makes sense, then the motivation to change or improve things is not present.
Mm-hmm. So is there anybody else who'd like to jump in and contribute? We've got a bunch of wonderful people on the line. Because I think what we're trying to do is help understand what we're after with the past pilot. And somebody earlier was absolutely correct, Laura, when she said there's so much flexibility. And there is. We're not telling you what to do, to put it in a nutshell. We are asking you what is a problem of practice on this continuum of implementing college and career readiness and persistence that you would particularly like to examine this year.
Okay, so this is Laura Hanson, and so you actually did hear what I said then.
I heard what you heard. I heard what you said up to a point, and then finished.
Okay, because I think I then I unclicked my mute, and I thought I sat there and I was talking to myself, because when I stopped, I must have clicked another button and disconnected myself, because then no one answered, and I'm like, okay, this is awkward, and I don't even know if anybody heard me. So I'm glad I didn't disconnect myself before I was talking. So thanks.
No, I would have said you were about halfway through what you were saying.
Okay, and then I must have just disappeared. So sorry about that, but I'm back now.
Good. Well, I do want to address that fact and ask other folks, because I think that is probably the largest challenge in the concept of the past pilot, is that we're not telling you what to do. We are asking you to identify, knowing that you're committed to this idea and that you're inventive, creative people, we are asking you to identify a particular problem, challenge, opportunity that you would like to explore and report on for the next 8 months and share your observations with us.
And so I think for Nashville, you know, I'm encouraged. I do think that maybe even talking with others about the process for how we are going to actually determine that might even be a first step. I mean, I think, and of course, you know, I have to talk with my other colleagues, but, you know, getting the different partners together, school, district, and community, letting them know, you know, what we're trying to do here and hone in on something, and going through an actual process to understand kind of, you know, what's going well, what do we want to do more of, you know, where are some of the things that are broken down that we can focus on, and move some of these things around college and career readiness activities. We have so many of them going on that can be good, but having that be a collaborative process in and of itself. And so, you know, I don't know what that looks like right now. I think we probably have some different partners that would love to engage in the conversation. And so maybe kind of facilitating a little bit, you know, some tools to actually facilitate that conversation, what we might want to use and get feedback, even just as a starting step.
That's a great idea. And you've also introduced something that's in line with our set of bullet points, which is the timetable it takes to reach decisions, the partners it needs to get at the table. So we need to look at that. And you be thinking in your mind of how long would it take to do all the things you just outlined in a short sentence. That will be extremely helpful to this. Right?
Sure.
Now, you know, that's exactly the kind of thing we're thinking of, because these things can take forever or several years. But we're looking at how do we improve students' access, enrollment in college, and persistence. And we don't have a lot of time. With this, I'm going to wrap up our conversation. I want to thank all of you for participating, and I want to do a couple of other things. Amanda's going to send around the list of emails so that you all can talk with each other. I will, you know, sit back and connect several of you that I think have similar interests. I hope you'll also send me your questions. We would like, as the next bullet point on this list, your ideas about what you might do as a pilot. And I would love to explore those with you further and hone them down a little bit more. And that's about enough to do for one afternoon, don't you think? And so thank you so much for participating. And as I said, get back with me as soon as you would like with questions, comments, etc. And also Amanda and Charlene and Ann. We all good?
Thanks, Joanna. This is Carla again in Gresham Barlow School District, and I'm really excited to kind of explore what this is going to look like here, particularly as I listen to the other comments around intervention tracking. So thank you for putting this out there for us.
Okay, thank you. And Carla, get back to me. Everybody get back to me.
I will. You can count on that.
I know. I can count on all of you, I think.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.